as well. So today our main presenter is Mark Maller. Mark Maller is a Daktronics field customer trainer. He's currently a part of the live events department at Daktronics. He educates customers on the operational aspects of the control systems. And we also have Michael Cruz here as well. Michael is a Daktronics application engineer. He works in the South Central region as a part of our live events department. His primary role is to help customers achieve their vision through live production on Daktronics video displays via technology, software and hardware, and techniques set up for utilization. So both Mark and Michael will be here today for presenting and answering questions.
Can everybody see my screen?
Looks good on this end, Mark.
Okay. Thank you, Danielle. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar on creating and editing data fields in Content Studio. Again, my name is Mark Maller. I'm a customer trainer here with Daktronics. Before we get into Content Studio, let's take a look at the basic signal flow of how real-time data integrates into your system. So real-time data, or RTD, is information generated from a scoring device or software that is integrated with Daktronics display systems. Data fields appear on the display as letters and numbers that are generated by a separate computer or controller. When a field is updated by a scorekeeper or stats official, it can immediately update on the display, hence the term real-time. This diagram is an illustration of how most data is received by your players. At the top, you can see the show control computer. This software is what will spend most of our time today creating and editing RTD frames. Show control communicates with the DMP 7000 and 8000 via network. Next image shown is our AllSport 5000. The AllSport sends game in progress information such as clock, score, team names, etc. Below the AllSport is our DSDI computer. The DSDI computer's primary responsibility is to distribute all data it receives to all the players on the network. And in some cases, the computer will also run a software called Backstats, which provides season and career statistics. Last two images represent our other optional data sources, such as out-of-town scores and closed captioning. So this document will be available for download from our documents pod. We can get that at the end of the webinar. Before you guys hop out, you'll have a chance to download that. All right. So now we've gone through the signal flow. Let's open up Content Studio. To do so, click on the pencil icon in the top right corner of Display Studio. This will open up our content compositor. From here, we can do a lot of things. Today we'll be building RTD frames. We could also bring in images to make a sponsor loop. You can make an announcements loop on here, basically compiling images, video, and data to make a presentation. So let's start by making a new game in progress RTD frame. So we will go New, Display. I have a very standard layout here. I have a bottom bar, which is about 20% of the bottom all the way across. I have a right side bar, which goes down the right side, and then I have a scale video section that covers most of the screen. And then, of course, a full screen. So I'm going to do a game in progress bar on the bottom bar. So to get a clean look on your display, one thing a lot of people do is bring a graphic image to set as a background to use behind your data. To do so, we go ahead and insert a picture. So I have a pre-built background here. I'll go ahead and import that. And as you can see right now, we could accidentally move that around. So if we want to, we could go down to our timeline and actually hit this lock symbol. What that'll do is make it so we could drag data fields around and not accidentally grab our background. Next, on the left-hand side, you'll see our dynamic data library. First thing you want to do in here, under category, is select your profile. For today's webinar, let's just assume we are at a college football facility that's utilizing StatCrew. So you want to select the profile that matches the sport and stat software that you're using. And then once you select your profile, you should see several folders will populate beneath. Each folder represents a different source of data. So the first folder you'll see is our game in progress folder. This folder pulls from your All Sport 5000. If you hit the drop-down menu, or drop-down arrow next to it, you'll reveal all of your data fields. Football data fields that are most commonly pulled from the All Sport are clock, score, team names, down and distance, possession, timeouts left, and period, all which we have space for here on our game in progress bar. So let's begin by entering our clock. So to do so, simply drag and drop onto your presentation. And once it's on your presentation, you can move it around, you can resize it, change your font. But first, let's go ahead and just get the rest of the data fields onto our presentation so we could go and change everything all at once. So I'll go scroll down the list here. I'll drag home team score, guest team score, home timeouts left, guest timeouts left, quarter, our possession indicator for home and guest. We have ball on, down, and distance. Now that we have all our fields that we need onto the presentation, we can focus on formatting them. So font size, style, and color are common changes that are made on practically every RTD frame. To change all these properties, we'll go to our Home tab. And it's just like if you were to change, if you were doing an announcements frame and insert a text box. It's the exact same way of changing the font size, style, and color. So we could select on one of our elements, and resize it. You could also select multiple elements by holding down Control and left-clicking each element you want. And then it's simply just arranging your elements how we want. Next, we have our font style. It defaults at Arial. You could either change the font to one of your fonts listed in Content Studio, or you could add a custom font. So if your school or team has their own font that's not listed, you can load the font onto your system. We have a KB article on daktronics.com/support. The link will be in your links pod that you get at the end. It'll walk you through step by step of how to load that font. So again, just like size, we could change one at a time, or we could draw a bounding box and highlight all of the elements. So I went with a Franklin Gothic medium, just something that's still easy to read, but it's not too out there. We could also select the elements. We could put a drop shadow, so we could say how thick we want the drop shadow and the direction and color, or we could just go and do an outline. So this whole having an outline or a drop shadow on your data really kind of make it pop a little more over the background, just make it stand out just a little bit more. So as I finish cleaning this up, we're about halfway through. So let's just take a few minutes to answer any questions. I'll pass it over to Michael Cruz to see what questions we have in the chat pod.
Yeah, if anybody does have any questions, again, you can just type here, or you can reconnect your audio. I see that Claude is typing. It's funny, this question comes up with every one of these we do, it seems. I think we need to do one on out-of-town scores. It's depending on the level of your venue and depending on the data that you want, whether it's professional scores, college scores. We have different data providers. Certainly we can reach out to you with that information at a later point, because that's kind of beyond the scope of this webinar. But there are a lot of different ways we can get out of town scores. Some of them may cost a little bit, some of them are free. It's really just a conversation that we can have with you, with your account service manager, customer service rep. A variety of people can help have that conversation. Fixed fonts versus variable width fonts is a kind of a question that's ultimately up to the end user. A lot of times people do want their own kind of customized fonts on the display, and that's fine. The big advantage to using fixed width fonts is that when you size your data to fit a certain place, you know that it's always going to fit. The biggest thing that we notice with variable width fonts is with numbers, for instance, the clock. When you have an 8 versus a 1, the 1 is often a lot thinner than the 8, so you'll see kind of your clock bounce around a little bit. Even if you have it center justified, sometimes you'll see that data bounce around a little bit. As long as that doesn't bother you, it certainly doesn't bother us. It's just a visual thing. Either if you don't want to see that data potentially bounce around like that, you can go with a fixed width font. Maybe you just use fixed width fonts for your numbers. That way you know all of your scoring data fits, but names, you could use your own custom font for. So you definitely have a variety of ways to set up fonts on your display. Again, the fixed width versus variable width is really just a personal preference in terms of how you like seeing the data displayed. See, John is typing, and Claude. It's the same thing, Claude. When we start talking about specialized fields like out-of-town scores and RSS feeds, that's another conversation. We have a variety of programs that can handle those sorts of feeds. So again, we can definitely set up a a conversation if you we can talk afterwards about who you would be working with to have that conversation. John, is there a way to map an image? Yes, and actually Mark will be getting to that in the second part of the presentation here with Media RTD, so you will be able to see that here shortly. Has everyone been able to understand? I apologize if my audio has been breaking up a little bit. I can type some stuff out if we need to. But as long as you guys have been able to understand me, please let me know.
Sounds good, Mike. We will get back to Mark then with the presentation.
All right, thank you, Rick. Can everybody see my screen?
Good.
Okay. So before the break, we covered the basic signal flow of real-time data, and we built a game progress RTD frame. So with that, I've been trying for the past 3 years to talk electronics and give me my own personal display for training purposes, but they keep telling me it's not in the budget and maybe next year, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. But what I do have is a stick display here. So currently, I have the game progress bar that we just built along the bottom. But let's move our attention over to the right side bar, where I've started a team stats RTD frame. All the data fields that we want to use are already there, but notice how it needs cleaned up a little bit. So let's open that frame in Content Studio. So again, we have all of our fields here. All of these fields came from our game stats stack crew FB folder. And then we have text boxes here to label what each field is. So we have our first downs, and then we have our data field, which if we go up to our field properties tab, we can actually see what field that is. So we see our total first downs, and it's coming from our stack of football. So I've dragged and dropped all these fields on here. And taking a look at my display, we see two main things that need attention. First, we have alignment, and we also have some justification issues there. So let's go ahead and use some of our alignment tools to kind of straighten this up. First thing I'm going to do, draw that bounding box around all the text boxes. I go Format, Align, Align to left element. What this will do is bring all the elements over and line them up with the leftmost element that was selected. So now I'm going to go ahead and do the right side. Go to Align, Align to right element. Last thing I want to do is just make sure horizontally they're nice and aligned. So I could highlight both elements, align to top element. I'll go ahead and get the rest of these all lined up. One thing to note while you're doing your align tools, if you do align to top as opposed to align to top element, it will actually bring them all the way up to the top. So just be mindful of what you're clicking, and it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish while you're aligning. So I could just hit Control Z or use our undo arrow up here just to put it back. So I'll go ahead and finish aligning these guys. All right. To see our progress, let's go ahead and save this out and take a look at our display. You can see it's getting closer. We still have some justification we need to do. So we could hop back into Content Studio. So whenever you're working on RTD frames, it's a really good idea to make some adjustments. Don't save it, but don't close out of the software, because then you'll just have to open it back up and go to open and browse out to the file. That just becomes time consuming. So we'll go ahead, since it's already open, we'll highlight all of these fields. Under our Home tab, we can right justify them. So now, when I save it out, you can see they're all right justified, but they need to shift over left. I can come back in. They're all still selected. I just went ahead and used my arrow keys, slide them back over, save our presentation. And you can see on the display, it's quickly cleaned up. And everything is aligned and justified correctly. Now that we have the game in progress bar and game stats folder covered, let's take a look at requested stats. So here I have a stats request RTD frame. So went ahead and already built it just like I built the others. Requested stats comes from the same stat software, either StatCrew or DAC Stats, whatever your play-by-play stat software is for your facility. It comes from the same software, but this is generally focused on a single player. So as you look through some of the fields, you have team name, team city, uniform number, last name, first name. And so you have all of your rushing statistics, passing statistics, reception statistics, and then some defensive. So here I have a RTD frame built for receivers. So you could build this template, and during your game, hop back into Display Studio. You could have a stats request button. So how this works, when you hit a stats request button, the roster will populate on the right-hand side of the screen. I'll go ahead and select one of the wide receivers, accept, and I'll go ahead and blow it up for you guys. It went ahead and populated all of his stats into that template. For more information on requested stats, you can check out the requested stats video on daktronics.com/support. It's a nice detailed video, shows how to build one from scratch. Now, before we finish up, let's take one more look with everything we have here. I know, so John Horton for your question earlier, this looks really great, but I was at a game a few weeks ago and I saw they were putting a football here instead of this possession arrow. So how we do that is media RTD. So media RTD is using a graphic image in replacement for data. So to do this, we pulled in our guest possession indicator and home possession indicator. So for media RTD, we'll actually go ahead and delete that indicator and pull in the text. So it will read POSS. Reason being, how media RTD works, it monitors that data field, and whenever that exact bit of data, POSS, comes through, I have a file named POSS in a particular folder, which I'll show you here in a second. So whenever the data matches a file name, it will pull in that file instead of the text. So we'll go to Field Properties. We have this Is Media RTD checkbox. Now my system, since everything's running on one computer, is a little bit different. So I'm going to just jump into my content folder. We have our media RTD folder, and I have this POSS.png. You can see I'm also using, for the Smith, I have his last name pulled in his headshot. But for this one, we'll go ahead and select a sample media. As you can see, we now have a football. And then we could do the same thing over here. Or kind of a shortcut for this, we could delete that guy. We could simply copy paste this home possession football, bring it over, and in our Field Properties tab, we can actually just change the field to guest possession text. So now this is going to monitor the guest possession. Now, when we save that out and hop back into and replay that image, you can see now it is a football as opposed to a possession arrow. With that being done, I do encourage everybody to try building on your own system what we did today. Since RTD frames are automatic, and they automatically fill with data, sometimes they go a season or two without being looked at. So normally I recommend building a test RTD frame from scratch every few months so you don't get rusty. Also, you can head over to daktronics.com/support. They have a lot of refresher videos on a lot of what we touched on today, and they're always a great resource. So that's all I have for today. I will pass it back over to Michael Cruz for another question and answer session.
Getting back with Claude here, like I said, what we recommend is that you create the images that you want to use for Media RTD at the size that you want them to use. Otherwise, you deal with scaling, which may or may not look particularly good on the display. At least if you create at the resolution that you want to see it up there, you get a better sense for exactly how that image is going to look when it hits the display. Otherwise, Mark didn't really have an opportunity to give an example of this, but there's that little green box that is around the football in that Media RTD example that he did, that if you scaled that, stretched and sized that box, there are some options that the images can scale to fit. They can just use best fit, stay at their native resolution, etc. So that would be actually how you'd scale. But again, we recommend that you create it at the actual resolution you want to see it, so that way you don't have to worry about scaling and aspect ratios and everything when you add the data. Jeff, yes, transparency will only work with PNG files. JPEGs don't preserve transparency. PNG is probably the best file format that we would recommend. Even without transparency, PNGs are nice and crisp. You don't have to worry about compression like JPEGs, and they show up really well on the display. Daryl, all Media RTD images do have to be in that Media RTD folder. That's correct. If you're on a 7000 or you ever worked with 7000 before, there used to be a bitmap folder. It's the exact same thing. All of your images that you want to use for Media RTD have to be in that one folder.
And also that video on daktronics.com/support does go through all those requirements and shows you the exact folder locations that you want to go ahead and save those in.
Generally, multiple sports, there usually isn't too much of a problem, because one of the things that you can do, particularly with players, is depending on the data source, and I should caution this, Stat Crew in colleges isn't quite as friendly, because they don't send over the same kinds of data that DACStats does. If you're using a Daktronics, if you're using okay, well, we'll go ahead and stick with Stat Crew since that's the most common in the college world. What I would probably recommend, and Mark, you can chime in on this, would be to maintain a separate folder for your men's and women's teams, and then whichever team is playing at the moment, just drag or copy those PNGs or JPEGs into the Media RTD folder, basically purging all of your other headshots, bringing in the ones that are current for the game, and then repeating the process as you go along. Yeah, unfortunately, like with that. Go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say, just be careful. The folder, a different folder for men's and women's is definitely a good idea. But just remember, the active files need to be right in that root folder. So it can't be a folder. It won't read a folder within the Media RTD folder. They have to be right. You do have to pull them out of that men's folder or the women's folder, or else it won't recognize them.
Yeah, if for any of you that are using DACStats, maybe for like baseball, that DACStats has the ability to put a player number along with a last name in one field, so you're able to combine those two into one. So like 56 Watkins. You're able to do that, which makes it easier to manage multiple teams and multiple images. But unfortunately, Stat Crew doesn't provide that data. I don't know that there's any development on changing that anytime soon, simply because if you think about it, you'd have to go, if we specified a subfolder in the data field in Content Studio, every time the team changed, you'd either have to have completely separate sequences, all of them, for the men's team or the women's team that pointed to the specific subfolder that those images were in. So it just gets to be a lot of management within the system, that if you don't know which sequence you're playing out and it's playing to the wrong, or it's looking for data in the wrong subfolder, it just can make it a bit of a challenge. And yes, that's true. There's a lot of work on the front end to get it all set up. But right now, I don't believe that's on the development timeline. We can certainly submit that as a request, and keep you updated with how those things are going. But as of right now, I don't think that's on the development timeline. I saw that Mike was typing there. I don't know if he's still... Okay. Not sure. Are there any other questions?
This is Danielle here. I was going to, I thought it'd be nice to show you some of the location of some of these resources that I was grabbing today and putting in that chat pod. So if you do have a question down the road, you'll know where to grab it from. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to go to daktronics.com, and I'll show you where some of these things are located. So right now, I'm just on daktronics.com, and the site that I go to quite a bit is under support and services, and there's a few different options under support and services. First one's customer support. You can do an online support request from here. You can research different product support resources. There's lots of different things on here that you can use if you want our contact information. All that stuff can be grabbed off of this site, the support site. If you're the type of person that likes to solve things on their own, I would recommend going to the knowledge base, and that's a lot of the links that I was grabbing today as well. So this is the knowledge base. Knowledge base articles are written by people like Mark and Michael, and our technical support groups, our application engineers, our trainers. We all write these knowledge base articles. Some of them are how to do stuff, and some of them are written more of maybe a break-fix type perspective. If you're having an issue, here's a solution to it. So an example would be, Mark was showing us how to do he gave a demonstration earlier on how to do requested stats, and now here's an article on how to get requested stats to work. So I could go through this article, and it would show me how to make a button to play out that requested stat that he made earlier. There's quite a few different types of things. Here's another one, how to create media RTD headshots, batter headshots. So this one's written maybe more of a baseball type perspective, but you could do this in other sports as well. That's our knowledge base. I certainly would encourage people to go ahead and take a look at that when they get a chance. Another tool that we have under support and services is our video support gallery. I'll click on that. So we have quite a few videos out there. Our trainer group, they make a lot of videos, and some of our other teams do as well across Daktronics. I would probably recommend here, because there is a lot of videos, to refine by products if you know the type of product or type of display that you're working with. So I'm going to refine this down to show control, and sure enough, looks like we've got 20 videos for show control, and you can see some of the other products here as well that if you were looking for help on. Let's see here, Introduction to Media RTD, that was the one if you wanted to change out your possession arrows and show that little football graphic or a basketball graphic. This little video will help you out, and there's a few other on there as well that may, how to make buttons, how to switch to your primary backup, that's a new one. So there's quite a few out there you certainly can go to for help. Another one here is training. So there's different training options out there, and you can certainly look into that if maybe you hire new staff in your control room and you are seeking out some help in the training department. You can certainly take a look at that training tab. And our last thing is a fairly new thing. I'm just doing a search for social media. Underneath here you can see there's a social media hub here at Daktronics. So if you're into that kind of thing, we do have a Facebook group. It's called the Daktronics Sports User Group, and that's more of a place for people to share pictures of their displays. They could certainly, it's a group type atmosphere. If you've got questions, you can certainly add them onto that Facebook Sports User Group, and maybe your other peers can answer those questions for you, and maybe you are already a member. One of our new things that we just launched as of this month is called the Control Panel, and this is a blog, and we just thought we could try to improve other training opportunities, share other things. I just published one today about some different training and technical support options. We did have a blog post last week about our stance on people interested in the Windows 10. So there's some different information out there that if you want to subscribe to this, all you have to do is click on that receive email updates, that orange box right there, and then you can subscribe and you'll get emails as soon as we post new things on there. So that's our newest resource out there. So I certainly would recommend people, if you're interested, want to learn more about our videos, just go to that Daktronics.com, support and services, and there's lots of different options out there for you. I think that wraps up our training today. We'll probably stay on the line, though, for a few minutes because if other people have questions, if you want to ask Mark and Michael anything else about Content Studio, you certainly can hang on the line here and ask those questions. We do have a survey in the resource link pod. I don't know if you can see my icon or not, but there is one of the links there is to a survey. And we really would appreciate that because when people fill out those surveys, that lets us know the type of trainings that we should do next. So if you would, under that resource pod, click on that survey, open it up. I think there's just a few questions on that. We really would appreciate your feedback on how well we did today and what we can do next. So that wraps up everything I have to say. And like I said, we'll just stay on the line if anybody else has some questions.
You're more than welcome, Tim. Thanks for joining. And if you guys feel that Daktronics should give me my own personal display for training purposes, feel free to put that on that survey. I'm trying to tell them that I need all the help I can get.
Still just going to give you the canned laughter, Mark. Sorry.
All I can do is ask. Oh, man. I'll just take a screenshot of that, Daryl. I'll submit that myself. So does anybody have any questions or just finishing up the survey?
Thanks for attending, everybody. We're going to go ahead and close this meeting in 60 seconds unless somebody has some questions. The recording will be sent to you via an email tomorrow, Frank. Frank, can you put your email on the chat box, and I will make sure that I get you a recording. Thank you, Frank. Thank you for attending, everybody. We are going to end this meeting.
Thanks, everybody.